State of the Central African Republic and to invite him to address the Assembly. Mr. President of the General Assembly, ladies and gentlemen, the 78th session of the General Assembly of the United Nations Organization is one I am attending on behalf of my country, the Central African Republic. It provides me with a felicitous opportunity to reaffirm our staunch determination to contribute to the quest for common solutions to the challenges faced by humankind. Mr. President, before making my address by way of my country's contribution to the general debate, I wish from this high rostrum of the United Nations, symbol par excellence of human solidarity, I wish to express the solidarity of the CAR people to the brotherly peoples of Morocco and Libya, who have been devastated by natural disasters which have produced colossal material damage which is incalculable indeed, and have also claimed thousands of lives. This occurred just a few days before the opening of our session. As I have underscored on other occasions, the tragic consequences of these natural disasters must draw the attention of the world scientific community to the urgent need to pinpoint the regions of the world which are particularly vulnerable to extreme climate events, and must prompt them to make available to the states concerned the necessary information to limit the damage caused by such events. Moreover, the entire world followed with great dismay in recent days the arrival en masse of thousands of African migrants to the island of Lampedusa in Italy. These young people represent the present and the future of our continent of Africa. They are seeking desperately to reach the European continent in search of a promised land. This escalation of the migrant crisis is one of the terrifying consequences of the looting of the natural resources owned by the countries made poor by slavery, colonialism and Western imperialism, as well as terrorism and internal armed conflicts. These are often waged in furtherance of hegemonizing agendas and against a backdrop of geopolitical and geostrategic tensions between major global powers. Here I do mourn the existence and decry the existence of this dehumanizing phenomenon. Nevertheless, I hail solidarity and unprecedented efforts deployed by host countries and the IOM to provide assistance to these young people whose very lives are imperiled by smugglers and lawless dream merchants. However, my country believes that the UN must go beyond our common commitment to revitalize global solidarity. It must get African countries on board in the search for global solutions to migratory crises and to the existential challenges which are facing the young people of the African continent. Mr. President, our countries continue to face climate chaos, to weather geopolitical tensions and face financial challenges, as well as unprecedented energy and food crises. At this same time, new challenges are appearing day after day on the global horizon. Today, in Africa as elsewhere, conflicts, symptoms of geopolitical and geostrategic tensions that divide the major powers are plain to see. In Sudan, an internal armed conflict rare in its cruelty erupted in April 2023, and that was at a time when the country was well on the way to normalization, with a promising process of dialogue underway, bringing together the nation's key players. The CAR has already hosted 15,000 Chadian and Sudanese refugees in the Vakaga prefecture, and our people are resilient, but hosting those refugees means we are exposing our people to a worsening of the humanitarian situation, and we risk seeing our security situation worsen further still. I call upon you to take account of the impact of this crisis and the effect it's having on regional geopolitics, and please show international solidarity in favor of our refugees. Against the backdrop of this session, the Russian-Ukrainian conflict continues to play out on the ground. There are no prospects for the peaceful settlement of this consequence, and that is in spite of the fact that the consequences of this conflict for the world are painful and deeply unfortunate. Mr. President, the persistence and increase in the number of hotbeds of tension throughout the world raise questions about the effectiveness of certain mechanisms for the prevention and peaceful settlement of disputes that the UN has at its disposal. The UN's primary mission is to guarantee international peace and security. These question marks are why we forcefully reaffirm the Common African position regarding Security Council reform. That position seeks to increase the number of permanent and non-permanent members on the Council and to grant a permanent seat to Africa, which is the only right and just thing to do. The CAR believes that there is an urgent need to provide redress for the historical injustices done to Africa in view of important agendas on the table and important summits, such as the Summit of the Future in 2024 and the 80th anniversary of the United Nations in 2025. Both of the above could provide opportunities for member states to unite and to take tangible measures to ultimately usher in the aforementioned reform. Mr. President, the CAR is pondering a question, and that is, how can we expedite the fulfillment of Agenda 2030 to bring about peace, prosperity, progress, and sustainability for all, at a time when certain states, wielding all of their political, economic, and military might, continue and consistently avail themselves of coercive diplomacy or instrumentalize IFIs in order to impose economic, financial, and trade blockades against those countries that have been made poor by slavery, colonialism, and imperialism. Indeed, on the 29th of July 2023, the people of the CAR learned to their great distress of the renewal of the arms embargo. That was brought about by trumped-up reports and allegations, with spurious exemptions provided for the national security forces. The CAR criticizes here before the world this cynical decision which betrays the unspoken intention of the members of the Council that voted for it to instrumentalize sanction regimes for political purposes and to bring political pressure to bear under the aegis of the United Nations. Here, I remind you and I rue the fact that arms embargoes and diamond embargoes that have been renewed for the last 10 years happen in parallel with the suspension of budgetary and economic support, and both of these factors are real obstacle for my country's achievement of the realization of Agenda 2030. Here we repudiate this denial of our right to self-determination and permanent sovereignty over our wealth and natural resources, rights guaranteed by the relevant legal instruments of the United Nations. Please do away with these trumped-up mechanisms which thinly veil a desire to allow insecurity to reign and to continue a stranglehold over our natural resources for the benefit of foreign powers. These mechanisms ultimately legitimize armed groups and give them the status of being a subject of international law. Mr. President, our planet is burning, our planet is drowning, the world is collapsing, the world is crying. Yes, every day the media announce natural disasters linked to climate change, which look very much like harbingers of the apocalypse. Paradoxically, trust and solidarity between the nations, as founding values of the United Nations, are growing ever more brittle, and that is taking the human community, the community of mankind, further and further away from achieving the noble sustainable development goals for the benefit of peace, prosperity, progress and sustainability for all, as enshrined in Agenda 2030. However, in order to rebuild trust and reignite solidarity in the face of devastating climate phenomena, commitments have been entered into by developed nations and major polluters. We saw that in the Paris Agreement, in Glasgow, and in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. COP27, in particular, was particularly useful in setting 4 major goals that we all adopted, namely mitigation, adaptation, financing, and a just transition in order to face up to the common challenges of humankind. Unfortunately, many countries have been the innocent victims of the tragic consequences of the overexploitation of our planet by developed countries, and these countries are not seeing the fruits of financial pledges made. Mr. President, we are rightly aware of the value of the contributions made by bilateral and multilateral partners in their desire to show solidarity towards Africa, our continent, and we thank them for that support. However, we call for a more dynamic, diversified, and agile partnership which respects the sovereignty of states and the cultural and moral values of all. It is only in this way that we will be able to reignite the flame of friendship between peoples, to promote peace and security, and to create conditions propitious to equitable and inclusive development. My country continues to advocate for an inclusive multilateralism, for accelerated, expedited growth for all, for a global balanced order, and we call for global disputes to be solved with particular emphasis placed on international peace and security and the respect of the sovereignty of each and every state. I like to avail myself of this opportunity to decry all the disinformation and smear campaigns waged by certain Western media against the CAR. Here, I reaffirm my country's determination to diversify its international cooperation and extend it to all countries who wish to cooperate with us with the only desire of furthering the vital interests of our people and of avoiding competition between global powers. That's the cooperation I call for. Mr. President, on the 30th of July, we adopted the new constitution of the CAR. That was adopted by an overwhelming majority of 95.3% of the population. There was a turnout of over 57%. And with that vote, the people of the CAR reaffirmed its commitment to the purposes and principles set forth in the United Nations Charter. They reaffirmed their inalienable right to the respect of their sovereignty, to self-determination, to the stability of institutions, to peace, to security, to national unity, and to development. To speed up fulfillment of Agenda 2030 and its sustainable development goals to bring about peace, prosperity, progress and sustainability for all, the government continues to implement the political agreement for peace and reconciliation. And we continue also to implement the Luanda Joint Roadmap. We are striving to strengthen the commitment of all stakeholders to these processes. As part of the implementation of these agreements for peace and international security, 9 armed groups have already been dissolved. In parallel, the Special Criminal Court and other ordinary courts independently continue their fight against impunity. I wish to recall that beyond the Constitution, our national policy of decentralization is the expression of a deeply harbored will of the CAR. It is also an essential component of the peace agreement and of the Luanda Joint Roadmap. I wish to here point to all of the efforts already undertaken by the National Electoral Authority with the support of international technical assistance, these efforts have allowed us to reassess the timeline for elections. Now, local elections are scheduled to take place in October 2024. For us, this is a fundamental step in our journey towards ensuring local ownership of democracy, the promotion of participatory governance, and local development. It is in furtherance of these goals that we wish to have local elections which are inclusive, transparent, peaceful, and credible. I urge all of our partners to support the government to ensure the electoral process that has got off to such a good start successfully concludes. I wish us every success in our work, and I thank you for your kind attention.